Welcome to Cut Off Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle. I am the producer and co-host of this lovely podcast. Apparently, we have a third co-host. That same bird from last week is out there again.
There's a screeching parrot out there that really wants to get in on the fun.
You know, and my poor dog is saying, I'm supposed to be the mascot of this podcast, and I don't like this bird, getting in on my territory.
Yeah.
Speaking of birds.
Birds.
So I went up to Lake Arrowhead, which is up in the mountains of Los Angeles,
Yes.
and for the weekend, and it was so beautiful. And it's beautiful up there anyway. Anytime you go away to the mountains, but I will say, what I noticed the most that was beautiful are the birds. They're not as loud as these birds out here across the street, but there's like these beautiful blue jays everywhere, and they're flying around, and it's just stunning.
I love birds. Birds are special.
I love watching them fly. There's just such a sense of abandonment, like just wild abandon.
I feel like birds are here to teach us things. I feel like they are visiting from elsewhere.
Really?
Yep.
That's interesting.
I have this whole thing with crows and my parents. Have I told that story before?
You did tell this story before. I wasn't sure that they were from like some other planet or something.
Okay, I'm going to tell this story very quickly.
Okay.
When my mother passed away, she was at home. We were all there. There was a hospital bed there, and she was on hospice. And for the last few days, there were mourning doves on the patio outside that aren't usually there. They were just there. And when she passed, they flew away. And at that very moment, I did this thing. This is going to sound weird to you, but in the movie Far and Away, when somebody dies, the camera did this shot that goes all the way up, like it's at the view of that person's spirit looking down at their body.
I didn't see the movie.
Oh,
but
what?
I understand what you're saying.
Yes. And I've always imagined that that's what happens. So I spontaneously looked up so that if my mother happened to be looking down, that she would know that I see her. Then at that moment, something caught my eye, and I saw a crow fly there was a big picture window, and it flew in front of the window and landed on the house across the street and stood there and just watched us for a while. And I knew that was my mother. I don't know if it was my mother, but I knew to me it was my mother.
Right.
So now whenever I see a crow, it's my mother, and my children always say, "Hi, Grandma."
Oh.
So it's a thing for us. And for me. So that's why I think it's special.
Sort of maybe the Black Mirror version of that story in my family. Because my mom loved hummingbirds.
Yeah.
And she, at one point, my mom was a musician, singer, and she put out a 45 back in the day. And she made up her own label, and it was hummingbird. But yeah, so she loved hummingbirds. And when she died, we were sitting by a window, and a hummingbird came to the window.
See?
I know, and my stepdad, said, "Oh, there's your mother." And it was a little shocking because I wasn't, that's not my mother. It's a hummingbird. I mean, it reminds me that she liked hummingbirds, but I was a little
it's kind of a sign, though. The fact that it was a hummingbird.
I know, but here's the thing. He said it in such a way that I didn't know he was talking about a bird for a second,
Oh,
and so
okay.
my brother and I both looked and we're like, "What?" Like what? And I heard my brother go, "Mom."
Oh,
Yeah, and my brother has Down syndrome, and so it was a little disturbing at the time. And but all these years later, it's become a little family joke. So every time I see a hummingbird, I'm like, "Oh, Mom! Hey,
there
Mom!
She is. Hey, Mom! Why aren't you talking to me, Mom?" Oh, Lord.
So it's not quite as sweet as your story.
It's still sweet, except for you guys didn't respond how he thought that you would.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
But we enjoyed our Arrowhead trip.
I'm so glad.
I didn't see any. My mother didn't come along on that trip.
No hummingbirds up in Arrowhead?
No hummingbird. There might have been, but
there are crows everywhere I go.
Yes.
Everywhere I go.
Yeah. See, this is how I feel. Is like I'm not going to. I love that you see your mother in The Crow and all that,
and my father now.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
when my father passed away, I was having a particularly difficult day.
Yeah.
And 2 crows flew across the landscape and landed on the house across the street and looked at me and gave me peace.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, maybe I'm just analyzing it for my own comfort, but I think there's something to it.
Good for you, because I see a lot of crows when I'm out walking the dog, and so your parents are haunting me as well.
Right, and eating dead squirrels and stuff.
They're swooping down at my head. They're making weird sounds. Do you know the weird thing about crows, though, is that they can mimic other birds and other sounds. So, like, you'll hear sometimes they're doing something like a click sound, like
yes,
right, and then other times I hear what sounds like a cat, and I look up in the tree, and it's not a cat; it's the crow. They are like mockingbirds.
Yeah.
They can mimic these sounds, and I have a feeling they do it to attract prey, or just to. It's another form of conversation, like if I wanted to suddenly start speaking French to you, I can't speak French, but I'm saying.
Okay, I was hoping.
No, but if I were to start clicking at you, and then sound like purring like a cat, it would be
interesting.
Yeah, there's got to be something to it, like because a lot of.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
there's something to everything, Rich.
I know nature is a miracle.
Yep, nature's a miracle.
So let's talk about DNA and nature's miracle.
Sure, let's. This is from Blaine Bettinger. He posted on one of his pages today. Many of us experience problems with Ancestry website functionality that is often resolved by clearing cookies.
Yes.
It happens a lot. Ancestry tends to be very glitchy. It was super glitchy this past weekend, but I don't think it had anything to do with cookies. But it was driving me crazy because I was furiously trying to...
Stop saying cookies because you're making me hungry.
Cookies. So anyway, this advice we provide often, which is usually successful. But why is this so successful and necessary? The leading reasons the problem occurs is because people are logging in and out of different Ancestry accounts, usually due to multiple DNA accounts. I'm guilty of that. While occasionally unavoidable, this is not the most efficient or ethical approach. Ethical? Oh, yeah, I guess so. We shouldn't share a request login access until it is completely unavoidable. I will agree with that. I always have people share their results with me.
Rather than having you go on as them.
As them, yeah. Precisely. Instead, we should be requesting sharing status at various levels depending on the project. This ensures ethical sharing and minimizes cookie issues. Yes, there are legitimate reasons for login access. People have to give me login for 23andMe because there's no way to invite people.
I see. Yeah.
To if you're not a match to them. So maybe fix that, 23andMe. I want to add something to that too that he didn't mention. I think people moving their DNA around so much like we used to do with mirror trees, I think that's what causes a lot of the sluggishness and the cookie problems with Ancestry as well. They no longer recommend switching your DNA to different places, to different trees. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it tends to...
It sounds like it can get very messy.
Yeah, well, they have such a huge database now, and with things, just constantly being switched around. Like it used to be almost instantaneous when you add your DNA to your tree that you would get all the benefits of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now it's days and sometimes weeks.
There's also more data uploaded.
Yes.
And, everyone's taking the tests and things like that. And so there's probably more to go through. But yes.
Right. So instead of switching your DNA around, use the hints on your trees that you are building.
Right. But you know what they say. That's the way the cookies crumble.
Please, let's take a break.
If you're enjoying Cut Off Jeans, please subscribe, rate, and review. Now, back to Julie and me.
Okay, here's a listener question from our friend Debbie Keys. She said, thinking this is a no-brainer but need confirmation, I've painstakingly built a paternal side on my tree after receiving the name of my bio-father. Today, I was informed by my first cousin that our great-grandfather was an orphan who was taken in by the family. My thought is that I now need to trim that branch from great-grandfather back from my tree. So in essence, since this is the surname of my father, the whole family has the wrong surname, and no wonder I can't match the DNA trail.
Well, yeah.
Yes. The answer to that is yes, Debbie. I've already told her that. This was a few weeks ago. But yeah, that's very important.
But that's what happens. You go on the information you have at the time, and then you find out something that you didn't know.
Right.
That affects everything.
It affects everything, and it also affects other people. I'm obviously, I'm all for sharing, having open trees and sharing, but it's so important that you don't have your stepfather on your DNA tree.
Right.
Because that messes up, because then, years from now, there's going to be all these trees that are completely messed up. And I know it's not your responsibility for other people's trees, and they should do their own research. But that's just kind of the nature of this product.
This is like when I told the story about the girl in my workshop that wanted to wanted to have her stepfather listed on her marriage certificate as her father, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. But because it's an official document, just have her walk you down the aisle, and say thank you so much, and you can call him Dad or whatever it is.
Yes. Give him a plaque. All right. Hey, I have a really good book nook.
Oh, Book Nook. Okay.
All right. So Dani Shapiro is an author who has, she's already written 3 or 4, not biographies, memoirs, and several other things. She's quite well known. And this is her last memoir, and it's called Inheritance, a memoir of genealogy, paternity, and love. Oh. Because remember last week we were talking about how I probably wouldn't be in Fiddler on the Roof because of the way I looked?
Yes, and I said, put on some wig and makeup and you'd be fine.
Which is usually what happens. So she was raised Orthodox Jewish, and there was always a problem for her because she looks like your Swedish cousin.
Oh, uh-huh.
She was very blonde, very fair, blue eyes, all these things.
Yeah.
And she was kind of tormented by that. Because even though people said, you don't look Jewish, you're not Jewish, she felt demeaned because she felt like
invalid, right? Like, you're not really what you say you are because you don't look like the rest of us.
Right. But it's funny because it never occurred to her that maybe she wasn't. Well, guess what? She took a DNA test, and she is not her father's daughter.
So all the haters are right? I hate when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So this book is quite the odyssey. She talks about how she discovered this and she had to go back and find out how it happened and why it happened and why her parents kept it from her and if her parents actually knew. And it's beautifully written. I can't put it down, frankly. It's great. So it is Inheritance, a memoir of genealogy, paternity, and love by Dani Shapiro. Dani also has a podcast now.
Oh.
I can't remember what it's called, but you can if you look up Dani Shapiro, I'm sure you can find it, but she talks to other NPEs, I believe.
Well, that's so interesting because that's something we haven't talked about. You're raised in a certain faith, with a certain religion, and you find out, that was not your given. Mm-hmm. But,
it's
honestly, but what is it that, though? I mean, no matter what family you're in, there's so many people that switch religions, when they grow up and find out
I think this is especially significant for her because she grew up Orthodox.
Yes.
Orthodox. Her parents are known in the church. They're
in the synagogue.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Clearly not Jewish. Yeah, but her father is a respected elder. I don't know if that's the term either.
He's a respected man of the faith.
Fair enough. Great. That works. But so that isn't, I mean, she grew up kosher. I mean,
so was she adopted? Was that it?
No. Okay. She was donor conceived.
Oh, okay. And the parents did not tell her that, but they raised. But that's
they didn't tell her she was donor conceived until about 10 years before her mother passed away.
Right.
After her father had already passed away, her mother. They were at an event, and she introduced her mother to her friend from Philadelphia. And the mother said, Dani was conceived in Philadelphia. That was my terrible impression of a Jewish mother. I'm so sorry.
It was actually pretty good.
Thank you. See, there's hope for me yet.
I have a role for you now in Fiddler. It's Yenta.
I'm totally Yenta. Or Fruma Sarah. So, and at that point, the daughter was like, that's a story. Why is that a story? So when they're going home, she said, Mom, what did you mean? I was conceived in Philadelphia. So her mother basically said, yeah, there was this, we had trouble conceiving and Dad had slow sperm. And so we had to go to this clinic with this world renowned doctor. And then he'd find out when I was ovulating and Dad would have to leave the office and run to Philadelphia.
Really?
Yeah, that was what her mother told her. But there is clearly more to it than that. And it's...
Well, I'm sure it's a great story, but
So
here's
great.
the thing.
All right, what's the thing?
If you are an Orthodox, anything,
Yeah.
like whether it's, whether you are a Orthodox Jew or, especially Orthodox Jews, let's
Yeah.
just go with that.
Yeah.
You would think that if you are going to use a donor, that you would go and find
A Jewish
a
donor.
Jewish donor.
Right, and that was part of her thing because as soon as she said to her mother,
I mean, if it's that important to
yes.
you,
Well, and she said, well, how do you know it was Dad's sperm? Could it be somebody else? And her mother said, of course not. He would never have agreed to that because of his faith.
Right.
In certain faiths, there is a belief that if a child is conceived with another man's sperm, that it is a bastard, even though it is raised by
Well,
their father.
I was even surprised that they went to a donor because they were Orthodox, and I don't know whether that's a thing or not.
Well-
but because the rules are so strict about
Yes.
what you can eat and where you
Yes.
can eat it and what days you can eat it and all of that.
And
But-
all of this is addressed in
Yeah,
the book.
yeah.
So,
So that
check
sounds
it out, you guys.
fascinating.
It's really, really good. I actually am listening to it because that's how I read books because I'm easily overwhelmed.
I love the idea though that she was in Philadelphia and her mother's one rejoinder about being in Philadelphia is, "Oh, that's where you were conceived."
I know, isn't that funny?
There's a line in don't even ask me how I know this, in Woody Allen's early play Don't Drink the Water, okay, which I think was made into a movie. But there's a line where the Jewish mother is introducing her daughter to someone. She goes, "Oh, this is my daughter Susan. She was a cesarean." That's so ridiculous. Like, what does it have to do with
I love
your
that.
adult daughter?
That is brilliant writing by Woody Allen, who we don't talk about anymore.
Oh, well,
All right. So,
It was from back when we could still talk about
yes,
it.
exactly. Precisely. Like Michael Jackson. Oh, no, I said it. Okay. So that is this week's Book Nook, and let's take a break.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Jeans, the new podcast starring Julie Dixon Jackson.
Hey guys, I'm back. I'm all alone in my nook at home to introduce this week's story time. This is my conversation with Lori Wagner Knisely, who's a listener and has a terrific story to tell us. She's really fun, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So this is the first half, and have a listen, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey everybody, I am Skyping with listener Lori Wagner Knisely. Lori, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. Where are you? Where are you?
I live in Independence, Missouri, which is a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, Kansas City, Missouri. Sure. Is that the home of a Hallmark?
Yes, it is, and that's who I actually work for.
Seriously?
Seriously.
What do you do?
I am an assortment planner for gift wrap and stationery and stickers.
How fun.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Who knew? Lori, you are going to tell us your story, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So how about you start at the beginning, and because it's a very good place to start. Let's hear it.
Okay. All right. Now, I was adopted as an infant. Mm-hmm. My mother was sent here to Kansas City from somewhere. That is the piece of puzzle that I've not been able to figure out yet. She was sent here and to a home here to have me. And this was back in 1967. I don't care. My age is out there.
It's out there.
It's out there. So it was a very common practice, and I was adopted through Catholic Charities, and it was a sealed adoption. Missouri is a sealed state, and so on.
Yep.
So about 27 years ago, I requested my non-identifying background information. And that is kind of like the intake interview, that when my mom arrived at the home, it gives the background of, her family, the alleged father's family.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
Yes. And it just had all the names whited out. But mine included her birthday, my bio mom's birthday, and my bio dad's birthday.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So they do that. I've discovered that a lot lately. I'm getting birth dates of parents without names.
Yeah.
Which is actually helpful.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
That was long before internet and DNA testing. And, I joined all the registries and stuff and just didn't get anywhere. So about 4 years ago, I think it was about April 2015, is when I tested with both 23andMe and Ancestry on DNA, with hopes of, hopefully finding something. And my 23andMe DNA came back first around June of 2015, so just a few months after sending them in. And I immediately got a third to fourth cousin hit with this lady named Ruth. Her last name is very Norwegian, kind of Scandinavian. Mm-hmm. I can't even pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try it.
Okay.
But she immediately contacted me and said, hey, the typical, hey, we're related, and I think you're related through this part of my family. I responded back, which became my standard response to people. I'm adopted. I have no family names. I know nothing except for this general information.
Right.
And so we exchanged information back and forth. And she was like, well, and I had the birth dates. She's like, I don't have anyone like that in my family tree, but you're definitely related to this lineage. And she gave me all these names, all these people.
Okay.
And she told me how to look at my DNA and compare it with other people. Come to find out, she was a retired professor of biology at some major university in Ohio.
Bingo.
I know.
That's awesome.
That has to be my first one, and she knows all this stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
So she gave me all kinds of information. I told her, I says, thank you. I will keep this information, but it is kind of overwhelming right now.
Yeah.
Nothing happened away in DNA for a couple of years. I have a coworker. I think you've seen me refer to her as Super Sleuth Susanna.
We love Super Sleuth Susanna.
She's just awesome.
So she works there at Hallmark with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But she got into DNA with her family. She's not adopted or anything. And she knows Ancestry, backwards and forwards. So she started meeting with me, and we'd have DNA lunches. And she would catch me up. She goes, you need to look at, your shared matches this way. Look at their family trees. And she'd show me all these tricks of how to combine, how to look at people.
So she's like your DNA sensei.
Yes, she is.
If you will.
And I now call her, after listening to your podcast, my Jen Genie.
Yes.
And she listens. She's the one who recommended me to your podcast,
okay,
by the way. Anyway, so we started building a list because in my non-identifying information, they included the extraction of my mom and the alleged father. So like my mom is German, French, Irish, and my father was Swedish and English.
All right.
And my DNA in both 23andMe and Ancestry came back and matched that. And they were different enough that my DNA matches, I could say, hey, this person is mainly German, so they're probably on my mom's side. I wouldn't get anything closer than a fourth cousin. It's kind of discouraging.
Oh, it's so frustrating, yeah. You just have to wait. It's a waiting game.
It is. It is a waiting game, and you try to do stuff to keep yourself busy and engaged. So I started building that. And then Missouri passed a law in 2016 that opened the original birth certificates for adoptees.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But us that were born 1941 and after had to wait until January 1, 2018 to receive them. Missouri sealed their records in 1941. They had to have a year. Catholic Charities fought the bill and said, you have to give us a year to publicize that this is happening and give birth mothers the opportunity to have their name removed from the birth certificate.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we had to wait. But in 2017, I didn't think I'd ever find my father without first finding my mother, because my dad was in the Coast Guard. They were engaged. She broke off the engagement, and then he went AWOL. And then she found out she was pregnant, and she never got to tell him, although she wanted to.
Okay. Is this information that was on your non-identifying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That was in my non-identifying. And so he did not know I existed. So I was like, he wouldn't know to be looking for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would think to do DNA. So come then September 11th, 2017, I got my first second cousin hit. Susanna had just told me, we just had lunch, and she goes, you need a second or first cousin hit. She goes, second cousin, we could probably figure it out. First cousin, it's for sure. We'll figure it out.
Right.
And so I get the second cousin hit. She reaches out to me. Hey, we're related through my grandma Gertrude's line, and we're second cousins. And her name is Jen. Her last name is Wagner, which is my maiden name.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Yeah, that was a little freaky. So I reach out to her. I first look at her family tree, and I noticed her grandma Gertrude had a younger sister named Lillian, who had a birth year that I thought was my maternal grandmother's birth year.
Okay.
Because in my non-identifying information, they also listed my maternal grandparents' ages. And my mom was the oldest of 4 children, so they listed the ages of her siblings also. So, I looked at that, and I had figured a year of an approximate birth year for, all ages given. On my birth father, all that my birth mom had was that his parents were divorced at 12 years old, and his mom up and left. His dad was approximately 55 years old, a CPA, and she knew nothing about his mother. So I look at Jen's family tree, and I noticed her grandma had a younger sister with the same birth year as my possible maternal grandmother's birth year. So I reach out to her, and I give her this information, all excited, and I give her all my mom information. And she comes back a couple of days later and says, no, that doesn't match up, because my Aunt Lillian and her husband were never in the Air Force. They were missionaries, and they've only had 2 boys, not 4 children. Okay. And she says, do we have any other common DNA matches? Which I thought was an odd question, because she can usually, see that in Ancestry. And then I sent her my dad's information just in case.
Right.
Just like those 5 little facts. Here's my dad information. Check this. And then I decided to go back to my 23andMe for some reason. And I started checking, common names on there to my Ancestry. And then I went back to Ruth's email. And I was like, oh, Ruth listed all these people in her email. So I'm reading back through that message, and I come across this name, Adolph Larson. I was like, wait, I've seen that name. I go back to Jen's family tree. Sure enough, she has Larsons in there.
Okay.
Expand the names, Adolph Larson. Same birth year, same death year as Ruth. I was like, bingo.
Common ancestor.
So I sent her, this message back. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this Ruth lady. I talk her all up and give her all the information. Jen responds back, I know Ruth quite well. She was Grandma Gertrude's cousin on the Larson side. They were best friends. They were in each other. I know who your birth father is. I was like, what? What? And she goes, give me a couple of minutes, because I don't have his history in my tree. I've got to check a few things. Couple of hours later, she gives me his name, birth date matches, how we're connected. His mother is her grandma Gertrude's older sister.
Okay.
Claire.
So how did she, when she heard that, did she just have a bingo in her head? Like, wait, this guy was in the military.
Yeah. She didn't know he was in the Coast Guard, but she knew because I mentioned that his parents divorced when he was 12.
Ah, gotcha.
And she knew that her sister, and plus she knew it was along that line. And because I had his birthday, she had his birthday.
Yes. Very helpful.
So, oh my gosh, yeah. And then come to find out, she told me that her grandma Gertrude and great aunt Lillian were professional storytellers up there in Philadelphia. And so her grandma and aunt loved to tell stories.
What do you mean by professional storytellers?
I guess there's a professional storytelling guild up in closer around Philadelphia.
Like the Moth type thing?
I think so.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
When I told my husband and my kids that, they were like, well, we know where you get your storytelling from.
It's a gift, really.
It is a gift. And so when Jen started having children, she started going down and having coffee with her grandmother and started recording the stories and then transcribed them into a book. And it's a self-published book where she just went to Kinko's and she gave everybody in the family a book.
How cool.
She had a copy that she sent me. And it is of the family history on that side of her grandparents immigrating into the U.S. It's a huge history. It's like reading the letters of your father.
Yes.
Great insight. Some stories of my paternal grandmother, her husband, and even of my father. And how they got from Philadelphia to California.
Okay.
But they lost track of the whole family when my father was about 12 years old. And that's because when his mom divorced.
Right, that was the divorce. Okay.
Yes. And she even sent me pictures of my dad when he was about 10. She sent me my paternal grandmother's baptismal record, which when I got it, I said, that is like a birth certificate back then.
Yes.
Because they did birth certificates. So she has just given me all kinds of information.
All right, cliffhangers are us. That was the first half of Lori Wagner Nicely's interview that I did about a week ago. Part 2 will be next week. In the meantime, we are out of here. If you would like to get in touch with Richard Castle, you can find him at Castle Songs on the Twitter or richardcastle.com. He is a composer and songwriter and a musician. If you would like to get in touch with me on the Twitter, I am at Jules Jackson. The podcast is at Cutoff Jeans Pod. Join the Facebook group Cutoff Jeans Podcast, or email me, julesjackson@cutoffjeans.com. Please continue to write in, give me your feedback, tell me your stories. Love to hear from you guys. You're a fun group. And also remember to share the podcast, rate, review, and all that other fun stuff to get us out there, because we really appreciate the help. And on that note, always remember, the truth is in your jeans.